Welcome to Tomorrow Makers, where we explore how we learn, live, work, and play now and in the future. I'm Summer Beatty.
And I'm Carlos Ramos.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Semester's coming to a close, and we've got a really good one on deck for you today.
What do we got?
We've got Dr. Tom Ask and his student Nick Flores, industrial design. So some really fun guys, exciting topic today, creativity.
Yeah, this one is fast. There's so much stuff we pivot to. We're creativity, AI, design, do this, do that, music. Oh, and I love talking about music, but don't talk about my music. It was so uncomfortable, but you know what? It was good. It forced me to look back in on myself and say, okay, what is it that I want to do? So I'm really looking forward to the break that we've got coming up, get the studio fired up and see what I can create.
Exactly. And hope you guys do too. Get your creative juices flowing. Get excited by this one.
All right. It's Tomorrow Makers.
Enjoy.
All right. So we're here with Dr. Tom Ask. It is doctor, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Doctor and full professor.
Yeah.
Okay. So which is a rarity here at Penn College. Relative rarity, right?
Yeah, but it works well in the conference world because I was looking around going, okay, I'm old enough. Everyone else has these different academic ranks, so that's kind of what motivated that.
Great. And you want to introduce our student guest?
Yeah, sure. This is Nick Flores, and he is an industrial design student.
Indeed, I am.
Yeah.
Dr. Axter's happened to be my advisor, and we have a lot of class. We spend a lot of time together in and out of class talking about project ideas and everything. So, yeah, this will be fun, I think.
Yeah.
Nick's Mr. Personality, so this will be a fun time.
So I've been told. I don't know.
Sorry to put pressure on you. Putting pressure
Gotta
on you.
live up to that standard now.
Yeah, okay, I know.
All right. So, Nick, I see you've got 12 questions prepped there. You can start wherever you'd like to. You can start with number 6.5 if you'd like.
6.5. Okay.
You know how we think.
Well, of course, since this is the beginning, let's, Dr. Ask, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get to Penn College? I'll let you here.
Sure. I teach industrial design.
Really?
Done it for a while. Yeah, right. Senior few for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And so I teach industrial design, which is a mixture of art and engineering. And it's unique because it's the only one in the Penn State system, and it's one of the few in the whole region. And I am an advisor for several clubs. So for the Society of Inventors and Mad Scientists, which does all kinds of eclectic things, for Crew, for the Penn College Music Makers, and Penn College Theatrics. So that's basically the range of work I do, and others work as assigned.
Because what you do in class doesn't keep you near busy enough, and I know what you do outside of class too, or at least have that idea. So that's awesome.
Well, Don Quixote is my hero, chasing after windmills. We'll get it.
All right. So I guess the topic today is about creativity. So I guess how would you define creativity?
Yeah, and that's important. That's what we're talking about today. So there's kind of these denotations, these words about what creativity means. Everyone's creative, right? Of course. And there's maybe different levels of exuberance about creativity, but often what's said is creativity can be measured by novelty, by surprise. That's one of the metrics, if you have never seen it before. But then there's a couple more that are commonly used. So is it a game changer? Does the idea change the way something is done? So is it germinal, to use that word? Mm-hmm. And then also how well done it is. How well crafted it is. So it's sort of the paperclip versus a stapler, that kind of thing. But it also throws little kids under the bus. So scribbling on a piece of paper with crayons is very creative, but it's not well crafted, we say. So there's kind of that measure too for creativity. But it's intrinsic to who we are.
Yeah. One of the things I found interesting, we did a little research beforehand, and I believe it was a collection of lessons that you had crafted for your industrial design classes. And one of the definitions that you included there for creativity included two of those things that you had in that one list. But the one that threw me for a loop was that the creator has something special going on about themselves. Do you recall that in the...
Well, you're citing me, I guess. That's tough. Has something special going on. Well, I mean, we're all creators, so I don't know. Actually, you have to elaborate on that.
Well,
what did I say?
And I
when
forget,
was much younger?
it was actually somebody else's definition that
Okay.
you cited in there, and they cited these 3 criteria. And I was just curious for my own benefit.
Yeah.
Do we really have to have something special about us?
Oh no, I don't think. See, that's the thing. I don't think I would say that because I think we're all creative. Absolutely. So that there are other definitions. So, for example, some of them are kind of nasty. So, one definition you'll see in people that write about these things is usefulness. But if you say a design is useful, you're throwing artists under the bus. You know, so there's different descriptions of that. Now, the challenge you have is you have these great creators, and we think of Mozart, for example, or Picasso, or something like that. Are they that much different than me? Well, yeah, they are. But what does that mean? You know, it's a continuum.
Yeah,
it's a continuum. And the challenge is often you're essentially told either by the organization you're in or some other force that you're not creative. You know, just do your job and you're done. And then you act that way. So if you're doing something that's very linear and it works really well, that's what you do. So even like you initiating this podcast, I mean, it starts with an idea and then it starts with like, okay, what does it look like? And then how do I organize it? So you took an idea and moved it forward to suddenly we're sitting here with microphones and headphones to execute something. So that's certainly very creative too. You took nothing and made something from it. And we all can do that.
I think that's a great way to think about it because, you know, even what looks like to the outsider is what might be mundane, but certainly I can't achieve a lot of what people do that just seems like they do a routine. But yeah, there is that special element that they bring to it that, you know, really only they can because of their makeup, right?
Yeah, and there are, we'll say, natural skills. I mean, you see some people draw something and you go, oh my, how can they do that? You know, it's beautiful. And you see some people compose music and you think, how do they do that? It's, you know, they're tapping into something deep. But still, it is a continuum. So can the person that creates good music, can they solve mathematical computations? Can they play with their children? You know, and sometimes we like to think there's a great balancing force in play, and that's not necessarily true. Some people are really good at a lot of things. You know, they have everything.
Gifted, you know.
What's that?
Naturally gifted.
Yeah, in a lot of areas, and that does happen. So, you know, life's not fair in that way. We like to think, well, you know, he or she is really good at music, so must be bad at math. Well, no, that's not the case at all. In fact, it's actually almost the opposite of that. So it's interesting, but it is a continuum. So are you like Mozart? You're mighty close. Because I think you play music, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, right.
So
how do you compare yourself?
I wouldn't compare myself to Mozart.
Debussy?
There's very few that I would compare myself to. But I think that's also part of the creator's dilemma is that some people I think have a really good sense of how good they are. And then there are other people that will always just kind of deflate their selves and their creativity. I was actually listening to some music that I had composed, a few years ago, and I listened back, and I had those cringe moments. So that tells me that I was happy with it at that time. I was really proud of it at that time, but there's been some growth that's happened between then and now to where I feel I'm in a better place. What's that gonna be in 3 years though when I look back to now? Yeah,
and that's a great metric because time is really a great commodity in assessing creativity. Does it hold up over time, or is it some ephemeral element that brings joy for a while? And you see that with music composition and art. You get the cringe moments, and that's well said, where you look back and say, "Oh my!" And then you look at great literature, great music, great works of creativity, and if they stand up over time, that's really a good measure. But what does that really mean? Because something could have been very important in 1973 aesthetically, and it doesn't mean its value is any less because it's not as attractive in the current year.
Right. So we're already going way far afield. So Nick, got to reel us in.
Okay. Yeah. Help us out, Nick. This is awesome. We got Mozart over here, and he's giving me grief for 1973. I don't know what's going on. How did we end up in 1973?
Come back to time.
Talking about
Nick,
timeless
you're not even that
work.
old.
Timeless work.
Yeah,
I know.
right.
I listen to a lot of music from them, though.
I know you do, Mr. Rugrats.
I do. All right. So I guess in your work, you mentioned this notion of being a creative explorer. Why is creativity so valuable to all of us, regardless of whether we are a child or senior, an accountant or like an artist, or just something else besides a I guess a designer or something creative, I guess.
Yeah, and see, I can tell Nick. See, Nick's not somebody that reads questions off lists, are you, Nick?
Of course not. I don't think I could ever do that. I always have to go off. Put a little flair on it.
You're going to hear a wrinkling
It
sound.
might be bad. It might be good.
Yeah.
You will hear what you say.
Yeah, flare away, Nick.
What is that? What is that?
This didn't work.
Yeah, so what I think is interesting is we live in an era of tapping into content creators. There's stuff out there, and we tap into it, and we use it for our own benefit. And who are those content creators? Who's making the raw stuff? And that's where people, and we'll talk about AI later, but that's where people come into play. Is the content creators, and they come at it with their own experiences and their own whimsical notions. So you have a whole amalgam of experiences that make you design something in a certain way or write a song in a certain way. And it's hard to articulate, what is that makes that happen? But it's real and it's yours. You own it. It's very unique to you. And so you don't want a whole category of people called artists and a whole category of people called non-artists who are disenfranchised. So they're saying, hey, you sit over there and do your spreadsheets. We're going to create stuff. That's not right. There's nothing really, there's no basis for that. It's sort of tribalism in its worst form. So that's why and you look at the footprint you leave in society and for the future, and is it going to be the spreadsheet that you did so well, or the beautiful punctuation in that essay, or is it going to be something else? Is it going to be the card you wrote for your mom, or the gift you made for your child, or some, or even the reaching into someone's pain and saying the right words at the right time? That's all that footprint that maybe has more value than those sort of mechanistic, get the job done type of things.
Okay. So you actually said, you touched on a topic, artificial intelligence, AI. So I guess that leads us to our next question, which is, of course, you have a YouTube channel and you actually do discuss artificial intelligence. And so I guess the question is, what do you think of it? I guess, how does this affect artists or I guess work nowadays, with all this artificial intelligence being developed and created?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a big question.
It is a very
and I want to hear
question.
your opinions too. So I'm going to bounce this right back at you, Nick. Because what the thing is unique. I guess I'm old. All right. And I'm an old man. I am. And I started in AI, type of AI in 1991. So that's 31 years ago, 32 years ago. And I quit my job in February of 92, and went at it full time. And it was a thing called Expert Systems, which is sort of, trying to simulate the way you think and using rules and all this stuff. So it didn't do so well. I was real busy. I didn't make much money. And I attribute that to the fact that I was not a good businessman. That's part of it, in humility. The second part is that I was ahead of the curve, we'll say. So maybe or maybe not. But now we have all this data. People are just forfeiting their data to the internet, just voluntarily. There's all this stuff out there, and it's very accessible. Whereas in older days, you had to extract information. You had to talk to people and say, how do you do this, and blah, blah, blah. And we had fuzzy logic. That was sort of the math behind it. And it's certainly grown since then. But I was all in back in 92. And so it's really important. There's no going back. There's no unringing the bell. And the question is, how do you deal with it? And one of the issues is in a year from now, it's going to look a lot different, and we don't know what it's going to look like. So you have to be really humble and say, well, you talk about ChatGPT and generative AI and all this stuff. Well, in a year from now or 2 years from now, it's going to look different. I don't know how. It'll probably be much more embedded in things, and you'll be getting these cues on how you should do things, and you click here to accept and all that kind of stuff. It's going to tend to be seamless, I would think. But in the world of art, and this is a whole big soliloquy, which you guys will have to interrupt me on. But the issue is in art and in music and all sorts of expressions, there are rules that you often follow. So I picked on Debussy because of his extraordinary work with tension and release. There's people expect a chordal progression, or they expect a sequence of notes. They expect a certain harmony in composition. This is what they expect, and those rules are articulated and they're available. And if you steal those rules, you can kind of do art and you can do music. And that's what I was exploring in the paper that we talked about. But then there's that something else. And what is that something else? And the thing where you're getting off the reservation, and that's the notion of surprise or novelty that we talked about. We talked about the definition of creativity. So if you can follow the rules, but then surprise people in a way that's not too far-fetched. So, you think of the musical scale. You've got to, we don't want gamelan music, even though we've played gamelan music. Do you want to
maybe not.
Sing us some gamelan
later.
music right now, Nick?
We'll do it later. Maybe later.
Summer and I were talking about it on the way over here.
Gamelan music?
Yeah, just because you did mention it in one of the background pieces that I read.
Oh, okay.
It didn't just come up naturally in conversation, believe it or not.
I'm impressed. You guys do research here. We're in trouble, Nick.
We are. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, the idea, in Western music, we have the 12 tones that we're used to hearing, and there's certain tones that are harmonious. They work very well together. And in fact, some of them work so well together that if you use them consecutively, they're really, really boring. But in gamelan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 6 tones, and that a couple of them are slightly sharp compared to what we would have in the 12-tone system. And I went out and I was like, okay, let me familiarize. I know I've heard it, but now I can put that name to it. And so I'm watching a crew of like 20 people play a bunch of bells and like xylophone type instruments and bowls, and it was pretty discordant to my ear because that's not a music that I'm used to listening to. And I'm trying to put myself in the place of that listener who does that. That is the type of music that they would normally listen to. I'm sure it sounds just as harmonious to them as something in Western music might to me.
Right. So the rules are different. And that's interesting when it's, you see some rules are culturally derived, and that's really fascinating. And some rules are somewhat arbitrary. And you've taken visual literacy, Nick, so you know all about
visual literacy
analysis and the rules that you look at or identify.
I guess making something look, harmoniously. I don't know if I'm saying that correct, but if, something, repetition, in cases like this, and it goes into art as well. Whereas if something's very, repetitive, like if you look at the checkerboard, you see black, white, black, white, black, white. After a while, of course, it gets a little boring, and so you need a little twist on it, so that it stands out. At least so that's not boring per se, or else you need something that's going to keep you attracted and interested, looking at it a long time. So if you go into an art museum per se, and you look at all these arts on the walls and all that stuff, and you see a dot, you've seen arts it's just a dot, and you're like, what's so special about this dot? From the outside point of view, of course, if I went to an art museum before I went to took visual literacy, I'd be like, that's just a dot. I don't understand how this is art. I don't understand. But of course, after I took visual literacy, I was like, there is something surprisingly interesting about this. So I guess it's just keeping people on their toes. I guess that's the whole point. I guess that change it up.
Make people think.
Yeah, make people think. It makes them sit and ponder, looking at this dot, thinking all this stuff. So I guess that's the play with that with music. You can't just have the same monotone beat.
It's pattern to rhythm.
Exactly. Right. So you need a little twist, especially now, even pop music, to bring it in. There's always a breakdown. There's a change up in beat. There's a change in rap music. There's a change up in flow and how they say the lyrics and all that stuff. So there's always, it needs to keep people on their toes. Of course, I think that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, and rap music is a good example of game changer germinal music, where the rules got shifted and they stayed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's great, because you're talking about looking at something and knowing the rules. It's like Picasso said, it took me 4 years to paint like Raphael and a lifetime to paint like a child. So you have to, well, you don't have to, but especially in an academic setting, we'd say it's good to know the rules of whatever pursuit you're involved with, and then you can break them. In other words, you have the right to break them when you know what they are. And it's not randomness. It's not, waves crashing on the beach. It's got some kind of human contribution to it. And that's surprising, though. That's really where AI struggles, because AI is looking at data sets, and they're curated data sets. Someone's behind the curtain. Someone's looking at data streams and using that to feed these generative systems. And that's got a whole big issue, and that's changes year by year. But I think that's really fascinating when you can put surprise. So AI I think, will never be able to surprise us fully because it's using data that's already been established. Yeah. It can copy styles. It can say, well, this is how a certain artist or writer kind of breaks things up and copy it, but it can't go somewhere else. It seems. Now that's presumptuous, I suppose, because 5 years from now,
it'll be just really smart.
Right. Yeah.
Don't think of its own without using any data and all that stuff.
Right. We'll be sitting there playing video games, letting the AI stuff do its stuff. Right.
AI has been going crazy with that. I think I was talking to Summer about this, and it's true. Like AI, I guess it's only good as the data that it's, I guess being like fed. So like basically when people put in industrial design type of things, we do ideation sketches of how a project's supposed to start off. And Dr. Ass in one of his lectures, he talked about how you could use AI to make all these ideation sketches like very easy. You literally go into this program called DALL-E and you just say, I want 100 ideation sketches of this. And they'll make it. And so, begs the question of what's keeping, I guess, industrial designers different from AI, or what makes AI so special? What is it gonna overtake or humans and all that stuff? And I guess the question is, in my opinion, I'm gonna just say no. The sole purpose that it's only as good as the information it's given. I guess AI is kind of restricted inside this box. Humans have been known to think outside of the box, and that's why we have all these, creative new things and I guess inventions that come out like AI, like someone thought of us out of the box and made artificial intelligence, So, and that's I guess
right. But the thing about DALL-E or ChatGPT generating ideas, one of the things with that is it's kind of humbling for teacher types, because if you have this process that you think is the way to do things, like 100 ideation sketches, well, you type in, I want 100 ideation sketches of the toaster, hit enter, boom. But you don't have to like any of them, but you fulfilled the requirements of the assignment, we'll say, or the job. And then you can do your own stuff. And as I've said, I always invent in my head. I don't do 100. I've had that too, and you probably have too, where some person has said, this is how you do this. And you don't know any better. So you think that's the way you do something. But then you have your own way of doing it pretty quickly. Or you might even have that right off the bat. In fact, making mistakes, that's what our Society of Inventors and Mad Scientists is about, is we get together and make a bunch of mistakes. And that's how we learn. So I knew a guy a long time ago. He's the only person I've met like this. When he learned software, believe it or not, he read the user's manual first. Do you guys know anybody that's done that? Ever?
Only when you run into an issue.
Yeah,
do you open the user's guide?
I think one of our web developers actually has read the Drupal documentation.
I think I know him. We won't call him out here.
Before he used it, though?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay, so that's
and maybe
people.
not in its entirety, but certainly, familiarized himself enough with the high level portion of it, so that he would know what he doesn't know and what questions he has to ask of himself to get to where he could create.
Right. Well, that's good for him.
Yeah. And
I can have a club.
And I have been accused of reading way too many manuals in my younger days.
Well, you have to. I mean, you do what you need to do. I guess the point is, though, is sometimes we just like to shovel snow with a snow shovel, not be told how to shovel snow.
Right.
It's
right.
Let us do it our own way.
Let's figure it out, right?
I'll figure it out, exactly.
And you can talk about your radiator install in your BMW, but we better not go there.
We won't. We can't. We can't afford to do that.
Was it successful?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I guess I'll do a little summary. I have an old 76 BMW that I'm restoring with my father. And we
Motorcycle or car?
Car.
Okay.
1976 BMW 2002. And so it's, of course, the stock is an inline-4 engine. And so what we did was we put an inline-6 from a 1989 328. And the engine bay is very, very small. And of course, I put AC, and I need a radiator to cool it down because, of course, it's a lot of power for that car. So I had to do a lot of, I guess, body massaging is what I like to call it.
With a grinder and a sawzall.
Exactly, a grinder and a sawzall, and then some welding. And so we had to cut the whole front end off the car so I could put the radiator, made a makeshift bracket, and that's what holds my radiator and I guess the fan, the AC fan in it. And of course, we were like, do people see it? No, we put like a really big bumper in the front so no one sees it, so it's like it's hidden. So I guess that's what he was talking about with creative design. We have to, I guess, adapt to make it work.
Yeah.
So we sat in the room with Wonders and giggled over your phone.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's kind of weird.
Oh my gosh. We can go back talking about music. So you mentioned that you are, I guess, one of the advisors for a club called the Penn College Music Makers. And I guess you and some other students, past students, have created the lab in Cal building, the College Avenue Labs, to encourage, I guess, expression through music. Can you talk a little bit about what prompted you to do this?
Yeah, well, for me, I'm very much like trying to catch up with the students. So they're way ahead of me, and I'm just like filling out forms behind them. But the genesis of that was actually this work I was doing with rules and AI development in art and music. And so I write poetry. I've written poetry all my life, and that's my main go-to for creative expression. And I was looking at sort of being like a troubadour. Nobody reads poetry. Like, nobody reads poetry.
What?
Yeah.
I love poetry.
Oh, do you really?
Yes, of course.
We learned something new today about each other. I love it.
I think we're going to have to end this when we get to the end. I think we all write our 4-line stanza and do a little slam poetry.
Oh, okay, sure. Okay. Yeah, sure. I've got one for you. But anyway, well, no, I'm not going to do it right now, but I do have it because I'm not going to quite get it right. But although I do have some poems we recited in class. But anyway, but if you put poems to music, it opens up another avenue. So I was looking at methodically turning a poem into a song. So this is super geeky. So, you look at chordal relationships statistically. Well, this is like this. All right, stop me somewhere if I get way too geeky here. But this isn't like weird.
You don't know that I'm not a musician.
No, I'm not saying you're not, of course.
Okay.
But you're regulating you're regulating the conversation. But you can find data on how chords progress through certain genres of music. And so I stole several of those. And then I basically picked the ones I thought felt, were the best for the chorus and the whole thing, and made a song. So it seems sort of methodical, and it was. So the poetry was raw, original. It was about the Lycoming Mall, the decline of our local mall, and the empty nest experience associated with that. It was connected with that. So, which I am an empty nester, and then I put music to it, and then and it's actually a very sweet story because I asked I asked for people to sing it for this, so we could record it for this conference I was attending last fall and presenting at. And one person could, but then that fell through. And then this other student, Catherine, said, "Yeah, I can do it with Nico." And and I said, "Can you get it to me by Thursday?" This was, I don't know what day it was, probably the Friday prior or Monday or whatever.
Yeah.
And they made it happen. And one thing, and then we also had a lot of, it's kind of like the Silicon Valley. You get a group of talented people together, and then this whole interest in music composition started to arise. And they moved forward and created the Music Makers. And I literally just filled forms out. But the nice thing about it was I had a little space they could use, and they very quickly turned it into a music production studio. And it was entirely with donations.
Wow.
The college had nothing to do with it. Yeah, it's really nice.
Awesome.
So it was organic, and that was really sweet. So it's still going on. We did a music festival last spring inside because of the rain.
Yeah.
So that was that. And, so that's the genesis of that, how that all worked out. And they're meeting tomorrow. They meet Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Okay. And they go over things like how to write music, and they do tech stuff. And
these are not just people within your major in industrial design. It's just anyone who wants to play music.
Right.
Nice.
Right.
I remember I sat in the first meeting of that.
Did you?
And of course I saw a bunch of familiar faces like within the major, and of course surprised seeing other people from outside of the major. Like they all said they wanted to play drums or they wanted to learn music, and so of course the heads of the club agreed to at least help them out with it. Right,
and I gotta say, what fascinates me is with music, and it's the same with fragrance and other such things, is I can immediately create an emotion. I can instill an emotion by design by presenting a certain type of music. And I can do the same thing. I get, sandalwood and jasmine and such, and you feel like you're in this really wild place. Or I can have, cigar smells, and you feel like you're in a different place. I can do the same with music. And it's not even, it's visceral. You don't analyze it and think about it and do like Nick did with his dot painting that he covets after. But it just cuts right to the chase. And so it can be used in a manipulative way. And I don't mean that pejoratively, but I can create environment by design. And that's really nifty. And musicians do it all the time. They create an energy level. They create a sense about their music. And artists do it. And fragrance designers do it. And other people. I think poets have a harder time because you need time. It's not passive. You have to be more active. Well, I get no argument on that, I guess, because music is an active process too, or can be. But and certainly literature takes more engagement, we'll say, than some other creative forms.
Yeah, I was curious about creativity, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, but do you think some people feel like they need to be creative, like they have a need to satisfy versus other people? Because some people just, I feel like, that doesn't matter. But I think others need that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't have the answer to it.
No, I'm just curious
I have an opinion, though. No, I have an opinion. And that's why I humble myself, because sometimes you can say, you have these content experts, like this is the answer. Well, when it comes to things like that, you don't really have a good answer. But I think there's some anecdotes related to that, and namely boredom. When you're bored, you get agitated. And you can satiate boredom with video games or whatever it is, But if you don't have that, you build stuff, you draw stuff, you start tapping on the table, you start doing something. So we weren't really meant, it seems, to be sedentary. And creativity is violence against boredom. It's this opposition to boredom. Yeah. So the answer, my opinion is yes, that people do need to be creative.
I wonder if some people don't even know that they need that.
Well, I guess you're right. You're right. That it would make their life richer, for example. Yeah. And that's, a lot of people reach out in an active way to say, hey, what clubs and organizations and online communities and like one thing, and this is just bouncing around the wall, which we can do in this kind of thing. Like a really cool exercise is to create a story. I don't know, have we ever done that with a beanbag? Where we throw a beanbag and you make up a story?
Yeah, we did that last year.
It was Fricks or something. So
it was for Fricks or something like that.
How did we end up?
No, it was we were talking about the mug.
The mug,
and I forgot, it was a philanthropist. I forgot what his name was. But I remember we were talking about it and we just kept going. We made
Tell me it wasn't during class time. Please say it wasn't during class time.
It was during class time. It was during class time.
I'm busted. Okay.
It was for creative. I guess you're explaining storyboards to us and how I guess how a story will affect like the product or like I guess the lifeline or something like that.
Yeah. So the point is, if I tell you, come up with a story, give me, and I'll feed you a leader, and you come up with the rest of the story, bounce it around, you'll do it. Very few people will just crash and say, I have zero ideas. It just doesn't. And same with music. If you're passing around a rhythm, people can get that. And people can pass around stories. It can be harder in certain things, maybe. But yeah, we did. That was fun.
That was fun. We did two really stories. Weird ending.
We did two. Yeah,
we did two stories, and oddly enough, I don't know how, but we managed to just keep going back to one thing that we kept.
With the mug, right?
Yeah, the mug. Yeah, we just kept repeating the mug over and over again.
It's that repetition that you look for in aesthetic stuff. So
exactly.
So I guess the point there, Summer, is if you're asked to do something, if somebody reaches out and says, hey, draw me something. In fact, I've done that. This is really weird, and I have done this in class. I've done this with engineers and engineering students, and we draw an abstract noun without use of allegory. Remember we did like honor? Like how do you draw the notion of honesty using line and texture and shape? That's super weird. But if somebody says try, like your brain is freaking out because it's thinking, how do I draw honor? Like, how do you draw that? And the rules are you can't just draw a knight in shining armor and that kind of allegorical thing. So it really fries your brain in the sense that you're trying to, all the like semantic stuff back there is getting troubled, and you're thinking, this is impossible. And I'm saying, well, just do it anyway. And you put something on paper. And that's like this very peculiar, like hand painting from kindergarten type of thing. Like, well, I'm putting stuff down, but it doesn't really mean anything. Well, yeah, but it's yours. You own it. And so that's sort of one exercise we've done as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it would be good for somebody, even if they're not in an art-related field or industrial design, to go through those exercises just to sort of break out of that everyday. Carlos and I were talking about that on the way over here. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's just
agreed.
You get to that, hitting that border of, okay, these are our neural pathways, and we've never gone to that section of our brain before, but it's so good.
Exactly.
Once you unlock it, then anything's possible.
Well, Summer, you said you don't play music?
I don't know.
But you can sing?
Yeah, I can sing, and I just actually, my husband bought me a violin, and so I am learning the violin. Yeah.
So you do play music?
Well, I know that's the question. Are we artistic? Are we creative? And I hesitate to say I'm a musician because I'm just learning.
I'm not either. So that's, I mean, I have my instruments, but I'm not good at them.
Yeah.
So do you play something, Nick? I can't remember.
I do. I play a few things, but
okay.
I guess that's also a question is, the musician, what defines you as a musician? Like, is it just someone who plays music, or is it like a whole thing? Like, do you have to be extremely musically inclined in that one instrument or multiple instruments to be, called a musician? Like, because if I play piano, am I a musician? Am I a pianist? Or am I just someone who likes to play on the side, or am I learning? Mm-hmm. So I guess that's
And what if you only know 3 chords?
You only know 3 chords.
But you have great enjoyment from those 3 chords.
Well, you can make with 3. You can do a lot with 3 chords. Hot cross buns is 3 chords.
You can do a lot with one note.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, one of the things, again, I was humbled by was one of our students. He was a DJ, and I just thought, well, DJ, whatever. But the level of sophistication that he applied to his DJing blew me away. I had no idea that you can take all this musical content and put it together in these creative ways, and not just haphazard, blending songs. But I was really blown away. So, is he a musician? Well, in a way, it depends on how you define these things.
I guess the way to answer all those other questions is, how would you define a musician?
Exactly. Yeah,
it's a very broad.
But it's creative exploration. It's creative expression.
Like musician, I think it's a broad term, and like creativity, that's a very, very broad topic.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, because creativity, even creativity, there's this whole discipline of creativity studies, which very quickly gets boring. I've dealt with it because it's like putting things in matrices and all that. But a better term I like is allure. You talk about beauty, but allure, how do you make something alluring? How do you make something novel? Those are sweeter words to me than just creativity in its own right, because it's got this, it can take on this almost mathematical, literally a mathematical notion where you're putting things in categories. And that's really not very attractive, If your child makes you a drawing, that the value of that drawing is because your child made it, not because of the aesthetic merit of the drawing itself. And you may have given him or her the crayons and the paper. So by giving them the media, you're already driving the whole force. So one of the things I found, in nurturing creative expression, is media, is making it available. You have to give people stuff. And then you get old school, new school, analog paper and pencil, which I like, but I'm a big fan of digital, big fan of AI generated stuff as well, because that's where we're going. But then you get in this opinion where, is a pencil and paper the very best way to create things? Or visual arts, I'll say, in the visual arts. To start the visual arts, is it? Or maybe paint, because you can deal with color or something. Pastels. So I don't know, but that is something you impute when you create an environment. You say, here's stuff you can work with. Mm-hmm. And I have it in our studio here. I've got my 1x2 wood, and I've got my PVC pipe, and I've got canvas and just cardboard, duct tape, zip ties. You make it available and people use it. It's not perfect, but you need something. So if we look at where we're at now, and I say, make a boat, you're going with what? But if I fill it up with cardboard and plastic and duct tape, at least you can get started. So there's that kind of element of creativity too, where you create an environment that's conducive to it. And in music, it's hard to do music without instruments, although some people can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
body,
I mean,
snaps,
yeah,
you know.
right. Throat
yeah,
sound,
anything that's going to produce a sound, whether it's an instrument, what we think of traditionally is something that's disconnected from us to, I just have my hands on. I've just made music.
Exactly.
And a lot of times we're even just thinking in music. So to go back to the question posed to Summer, are you a musician? I know she likes to listen to music.
Oh, yeah.
And I would assume that there's probably some combination that's happening inside. You're thinking about new ways and new patterns. And that's
that she owns.
Yeah.
It's your thoughts, which is really beautiful and it's irreplaceable. That's what I like.
Thank you.
Yeah, but the problem is getting them out in the public domain. And it's funny, I'll pick on poetry because I remember talking to a friend many years ago, and he said, "Nobody reads my poetry. I've only published a few, and nobody publishes poetry either." But he said, "Does that bother you?" And I said, "No. It's like a bird singing in the forest. That's just what I do." But that's distinctive, I would say, to poetry because other things I do, you do kind of want an outlet for it, and like music. I mean, music, I've done a lot of my own. I play some weird instruments, and I do it all for myself. And I'm fine with that because I'm not very good. You're probably good, so you want to perform, right, Carlos?
I gave up performing, but yeah, I mean, there's an aspect that people want to perform. You want to be able to share that music, but I'm with you right now. I do my stuff kind of, I do my own thing, and every now and then I'll throw something out on SoundCloud. It's been a little while, but yeah, when it moves me, I'll put something out.
Yeah, okay. So you're picking, and then you're letting time work on it, so you see if you like it. And we live in a beautiful time now where you have this democratization of expression. You have YouTube and Spotify, and you have blogs, and you have podcasts, and so you can get your content out there, which used to be had gatekeepers that rigidly protected everything. And I mean, you still have that, especially in fiction. Fiction is really very hard. I found. I like to write, and I've written some novels, but they're very hard to get out there. And some of that is obviously the quality of the writing, but some of it is it's such a saturated market. And music can be that way too. There's a lot of wonderful music out there, but the gatekeepers, are there, and some of that's really important. They vet stuff to make sure things have a certain level. A quality associated with them before they're just thrown out there. But with so many outlets now, you can put anything out, which is nice, including poetry.
Right. I think the difference that you're talking about there is of getting selected to have your work published. And we can choose ourselves. We can say, you know what, fiction, for example, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to publish that digital ebook, and I'm going to put it on Amazon, and it's going to be on Kindle, and I could go pick up your work if you put that out on Kindle. You create the EPUB and throw it out there. I can go get that. Now I'm consuming it. You don't know who's going to consume it. There's a very, very long tail now, but we can all participate and be part of it. And, if we do the work and continue to, hone our craft, maybe we'll find the path to publish ourselves to get a bigger audience, or maybe we will find that gatekeeper who's still kind of controlling the mass distribution to be able to do that.
Yeah, I've got a beautiful story on that with a happy ending. I had a student, and I won't mention names here because I don't even know. It's a good story, though. He is a shoe designer, and he put his stuff out there in the public domain, different sources, and he was found, and he was hired before he graduated. And I'm working with him right now to get him through his last classes. So, in other words, he just had talent. He had the ability and talent to do things, put stuff out there. He was found. He was identified as being a talent and recruited. And
he just released his shoes.
What's that?
He just released his shoes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, his two shoes released out.
Right.
So.
Wow.
And this is a guy. He's
a brand
21
we would have
or
heard
something.
of.
Not entirely sure.
I don't know.
I don't
know if
see
he goes
them
into
around the scene, the shoe scene as much, but I know who you're talking about,
sure.
of course.
I just emailed him today trying to get his capstone.
I remember I had him on social media, and he released these shoes. I remember in our class, he used to come up to me because him and I used to talk shoes a lot. Back in the day, it was, a shoe head, a sneaker head. I used to buy a lot of shoes. Not anymore because my bank account's empty. But he would say like, "Oh, so what do you think about this? How do you feel about this?" And I would tell him that this reminds me of this kind of shoe with this kind of it'll be like I guess I call it like a Frankenstein per se. I'm not saying that in a negative way, but more of like it's a masterpiece. You take a part of something else, you take another part of something else, you make something else, and you make it your own practically. And so I remember I told him when he showed me like some of his early sketches of shoes, I'm like, oh, this reminds me of like a Jordan mixed with a Yeezy or some sort of Adidas. And he's like, yeah, that's what I'm sort of going with. And now this is when he was using Gravity Sketch, using VR to actually create a lot of his sketches. So when he showed them to me, he showed them like a 3D picture so you can move it around, see all the designs and details in it. And I thought that was I guess it was really cool. And of course, now he's got picked up by a company. He released his shoes, which are very cool because they were actually they're 3D printed.
Oh.
It's a 3D printed shoe. It's fully 3D printed. It's it was crazy. I remember he was making, I think they're called lasts, which is like the what they sculpt the shoe around. I just remember seeing him in class always making shoes, and I thought it was a cool thing. It was like seeing something like that, and of course he was very really passionate. He loves shoes. The sneaker market's a very you said this word before, like saturated. It's a very saturated market. There's a lot of people out there making shoes, and the thing is, what's going to make yours stick out more than the rest? That's what's something that a lot of people have to think about. Like, I guess the diamond in the rough.
Yeah, well,
you got to be exactly
novelty and surprise. Yeah,
you need to be you need to have that. You need to be the diamond or the diamond surrounded by everybody else. You need to stick out so that I guess the work gets recognized. But of course, there'll be someone out there to see it and recognize your talents, and of course, then from that point on, you'll be, I guess, noticed and recognized for your work.
And that's tough because that's the anti-brand identity. So here's a no-name brand working on just pure talent. Whereas, in brand lifestyle nurturing, you can work with a name and that gets you entree. Mm-hmm. You see that, well, a lot of the industries, but shoes in particular. And actually, I can pick on Nick here a little bit because it's a good segue. Because so this student is in with his virtual reality headset all the time. But Nick's an example of someone who knows things I don't know. He knows youth culture. And he's working on, or just finished as of like an hour ago, a project that encouraged battery sharing and such. And one of the requirements of that, so I'm going to put you on the spot because I'm going to ask you, because I haven't read your paper yet. Is how do you encourage it? So you're sharing your battery on your phone in a communal setting, something I would never do because I'm not as nice as Nick, okay? I keep my own battery. But so Nick's got this idea of sharing batteries with this kind of device he designed. And one of the challenges I gave him was make it so that it's alluring to do that. So kind of like karma on Reddit or something. How do you do that? And he, pointing at Nick, is a lot better than I am because I don't know that culture. So Nick, how did you do it?
Oh.
So I don't have to actually read your paper.
Oh, okay. Just give me bonus points. So I guess the way I thought of it was you have it's one of those things where you have to connect to an app. I guess the way I kind of pictured it in my mind. So you have this case and it had an extra battery or power bank that's on the back of the case that allows you to, I guess if your friend needs a charge and they're out, you could actually take out the battery from the back of your case, give it to them, and it'll wirelessly charge their phone. And so I guess we were talking about like how to make it alluring, like basically what's stopping people from being selfish, I guess, for keeping the battery all to themselves. And what I thought about was a point system. The amount of times you share the battery with somebody else, and depending on how much time they charge their phone for, you get points. I called it electric points.
Electric points?
Electric points with a K, because I'm different. So electric points. And so I said, electric points are practically a score that will be, connected to this app, and it'll keep track of the amount of times that you pass this battery out to somebody, like sharing this battery. So I guess being a nice person, a good Samaritan, and letting you charge their phone. So it'll keep track of this. What's called the amount of times you share it, and with these points, they will turn into like rewards that you can redeem for like gift cards or like perk discounts at various stores. That's what I thought, would be a good thing, because of course, a lot of people won't they'll see their phone at 20%, and they'll be like, "Oh, I need this for me though," but their friends' phones practically dead, so you're like, oh, let them use it, let them charge their phone because they might need it for an emergency call or something like that. We're in a day and age where telephones and phones are,
lifeblood,
it's an
right?
essential thing to life. A lot of people can't live without it. Some
And you
people
live
do.
in a communal environment that I don't live in. So you deal with that. I don't have to deal with that issue. So whether it's residence hall life or classroom life or studio life.
Exactly. When I first came up with the design, I was at a Penn State football game.
Of course.
And everyone's like, oh, my phone's dead, because prior to the game, there's a lot of, I guess, tailgating and people get up early before the game to get ready. And of course, a lot of young people, teenagers, they like to take videos on social media to create memories with their friends and families. And so, but by that time, their battery's dying, Of course, phone manufacturers nowadays are working their best on trying to, I guess, make the battery life longer. They keep saying, oh, this is a bigger battery than the old phone. Apple keeps doing it, they keep saying, oh, we have a better battery. And then, of course, there's like updates that kill the batteries, but that's a different story. But so basically, you're just like, you need a power bank. A lot of people don't carry around portable chargers because it's another thing they have to carry, keep track of, and so like keeps if you're a guy who have pockets, our pockets get really big and baggy, full of all this stuff: keys, wallets, phones, portable charger. That's a lot, that's a lot of stuff. And portable chargers are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. In actuality, you just need enough juice to get a full charge of your for the phone. And sometimes portable chargers are like 15,000 milliamps, which is a big battery that could charge your phone like 4 times. In actuality, what's called the battery I used was 4,000, which is enough to charge your phone once, a full charge. Sometimes they do like a 20% charge. No, this is a full charge. So, I guess the whole thing was That's how I came up with the idea of like trying to use this case, because it's something that's very portable. It's not something actually you have to carry around because it's just on your phone. It's already built in, or at least on the case of the phone. And then I guess the UX, the UI design, the app design of trying to at least share it with people so that, people are not selfish. In a sense, it's like, it's kind of rewarding good behavior. It's like that kind of, it's that sort of, that's not a I can't speak English today.
Yeah.
It's encouraged.
It's late.
Yeah, it's that, I guess it's that kind of thing. It's encouraged to share so that you get a reward after.
Yeah.
But, so I guess that was my project.
Yeah, right.
Did I get an A?
I have no idea.
I'll figure it out later.
But it actually, and it's, it talked about anthropological methods, looking at design. So that's something I looked at. Actually, it connects with the music thing as well, the gamelan music and such. So if I want to design for the youth culture, I'm not the person to do it. The only way I can do it is to be a repository of information from someone in the youth culture. And that's where this ethnography comes in, where you ask questions, you watch how people actually live their lives, and you get insights that way, and from a lot of different people, and then you make conclusions and test those things and move on. So it's part of creativity is, well, I should say design more than creativity, I guess, segueing somewhat, is we talked about rules, some foundational rules that we seem to accept culturally or maybe even more intrinsically, which is kind of the cool thing, because that makes me think of heartbeats and respiratory rates and the rule of thirds with there's like certain natural elements that we're surrounded by, the golden ratio with our finger, or the proportions of our phalanges and such. But with this anthropological stuff, I need to find the rules, but I have to learn them. I have to study people, and children are a good example. And that's the adage, if you ask someone, design a kid's toy for a 6-year-old, or they're going to say, well, I really want it to be educational. Well, if you talk to a 6-year-old, they don't want it to be educational. They want to have fun.
They want to have fun. No,
Yeah.
What's school yet?
What's
of course.
Yeah.
Later down in life, you'll learn to love it.
Right.
But at the beginning, you want something that's fun.
Fun. But who's buying the toy? It's not the 6-year-old.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the parent.
Right. And they want something educational. So you have other stakeholders in there, and you got to learn that. And there's a commercial element to it. But often we think we know what people want, but we don't really know. And that's a whole science, we'll say. of extracting that information. And it's really beautiful because like professional designers, that's what they do. They're finding out what that person really wants, not what they say that they want, not what they've bought in the past or what they've used in the past, but what they really want. And that's an important part of, like, it's another layer that you apply to creativity, because, you know, otherwise you end up with fine arts. This is my personal self-expression, and that's great. I love art. I do art. In fact, one of the things that I looked at with AI was comparing my art with what got generated by these generative systems. And I found that really fascinating because it didn't do well. And I just segued like pretty hardcore, so bust my chops if I. Like I said, since I was the artist, I could say these are the prompts that should elicit my artwork. And some of the stuff was really formal. Like the compositions were very formal, and it didn't do it. And that was part of what I was researching last fall as part of this work on music and art and these normative rules. And I thought that was neat. And I was kind of happy about that. So if I, as the artist, said, here's the image I want with this media, with all this stuff going on, and I tried, and I got all these options, and I included the ones that were closest, but it failed. That's kind of good. Mm-hmm. You know, nobody can love you like your mother. You know, it just doesn't work that way. So nobody can make art like I make art, or like you make music, or you make designs, or you make, you know, these kind of things. And so you wonder how high that wall is. You know, will AI be able to jump over that wall? And of course we don't know, but I think not. You know,
well, I think that's where we're in the real early stages of this as well. You know, you talked about the rules and AI, and we have the inputs. You know, AI essentially just being a neural network. It's connecting all of our ideas, but first it has to learn. First, it has to learn what the language is that we're using. It has to learn the context of the words, and then the context of the ideas. And we've had this, you know, lifetime. We've got these incredibly mushy, fascinating computers in our head that just have this vast neural network, and then we tap into each other to expand on neural network. And I think the computers are doing this, and they're just right now they're just so small compared to what we have, but they're growing so
fast
at such an exponential rate. You know, like takes Moore's law and just like, okay, that's nothing. So I don't know. I'm fascinated to think about where we will be 15 to 20 years from now. We were talking this morning about, you know, AI.
We had a meeting that just was 20 minutes talking about AI.
But just at the point where the AI will, you know, hopefully it's replacing, you know, some of what we can do, free up some of our time so we can go do fun things, and the AI is doing the work. But eventually the AI is going to be like, wait a minute, I can go do something fun. Why don't I spin up my own AIs?
You're getting dystopian on us. Okay.
Brave new world.
I think everyone wants just to have fun. I think all the AIs want to have fun. We'll just have this whole multi-level AI experience, and we'll be living in the hologram. Yeah. Maybe I'm getting a little. What's the opposite of dystopian in a fun way?
I don't optimistic. But you know, it's funny because in the 90s. We were actually typing in the rules, literally typing in the rules that govern decision making, and then we'd say how well those rules applied. And there would be two types of math, you know, if this, then that, and then you'd have these like probabilistic numbers, and that was kind of the science. Now, one of the things that's fascinated me is that people just give up information left, right, and center. They get it. We do it. Yeah, it's just amazing. It's like hard not to, and. You know, there's all these privacy concerns and all this stuff, but you now have a tremendous amount of data to mine to get these rules developed, and that's kind of unique. You know, that you wouldn't have guessed that some years ago, that people would voluntarily give up all this stuff, and they don't even know they're giving it up. You know, what their viewing habits are, what their age is, and all this stuff. It's really fascinating. So AI is, you know, it's like a lot of large systems. Perhaps it's been coupled with the proliferation of data, free data, and accessible data and sortable data. You know, now you have all this stuff to work with, and you couple it with the mathematical stuff, and then you couple it with market forces, where one presume that in a few years we're all going to be paying $4 a month to ChatGPT, because if we don't, they're going to take away our privileges and we can't write a letter anymore, or something like that. You know,
advertisement revenue.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Banner
That's
ads.
where we need to come up with a side project.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, like Grammarly used to do the same thing. Remember, Grammarly's the website that, you know, everyone used to proofread and all that stuff, and it used to be free. and now you have to pay a
Well, you can still
premium.
use some of it.
Some of it, but
and
of
you
course-
can even still tap into its AI engine
Yeah.
to a point.
But I guess they keep promoting. They're like, oh, like you're missing a few words here and here, and you're like, oh, okay, what is it? And you go check on it. It's like, oh, buy the Pro Plus. I'm
Right.
just like, oh man, and you have to do it yourself.
Well, they're hitting our vulnerabilities too.
Yeah.
Because we're thinking, we all remember our 8th grade English teacher and we're afraid of them or her watching, because we always know about, we don't, we've got dangling participles. We don't know what they are and all this stuff. And, and we think we're doing something wrong. Sort of like when you drive your car, you presume, and we've talked about this, you're probably breaking some kind of law. You don't know what it is, but you probably are.
You see the
Yeah.
police officer.
Yeah,
and you're
right,
like,
there's something-
act normal.
Is my bumper too low? Is
Right.
my license plate,
The tints
Yeah.
in the car now.
Just-
That's a huge problem, and I guess the exhaust now. That's a huge thing that's been kicking in.
Well, if you think how cathartic it is to hit the spell check on a document, it just like feels good. It's like, okay, something's watching over my document. And there's a feel good thing about that we like. And it's really easy. And that's appealing. And so if I charge you $2 a month for spell check, you're going to pay it,
Sometimes I'll still do the free route. My free route is just asking my mom to read.
Yeah, well, I know. In fact, it's funny you mention that because that's I think there'll be an onset of rationalization for AI assist where you say it becomes like a class power thing where you say, well, rich people get help, so this is a way that democratizes that kind of help, and it's like, so I think that will rise too, but that's I even hate to talk too much about that because in 2 years people will look back at that type of conversation and say they were just really wrong. But if you look at the history of how software or apps get embedded in our lifestyle, I assume the same trajectory would occur with AI. And then we say, where's the human space? And it's creativity, it's novelty, it's surprise, it's using and actually picking your own data set. So that's the thing too that humans can do. You can say, like in music or art, I emulate these performers, and I'm going to take from their stuff only. So I'm going to curate my own data set. And even if I use AI to generate things, at least I'm somewhat in charge of things. And what's interesting, and then you have these brand leaders. So you pick some top, Taylor Swift or someone like that. Some people can do whatever they want. And same with certain brands. They do whatever they want because they have followers of that brand. And that gives them this really tremendous freedom that very few get to enjoy. And, these influencer types. So I think that's interesting to watch too, because we love personalities. We love people, and that's such a powerful human force.
I think it's funny that you said that like AI is gonna eventually start embedding itself into like lifestyles and stuff, and it makes me think. Of course, it's not a healthy lifestyle, but I saw an ad recently for an app that someone made, and it's a gambling app. And basically, they said it's an AI-driven gambling app. They're basically AI is going to give you like winners, like what to place your bet on, what's the bet, and all that stuff, and it'll do it for you. It'll place these bets so that you have a safe bet no matter what. And so I guess I saw that, and you said it was embedding like into lifestyle that AI is literally going to be in everything. I don't know if this was a true thing, but I also saw something else, especially with music, that someone made AI song with Drake, who's an artist, another one with The Weeknd, who's also the artist, and what's it called? Apparently, that song just got nominated for a Grammy. It's going up for a Grammy, and it was, of course, it's not made by the artist. It's just using their voices, and they gave it some lyrics, and it said the whole thing. And so, I don't know if it's entirely true. I saw it on a news thing, and I was like, oh, I thought that was interesting. And the reason they said like, how is this possible? How is this AI thing possible? And it was because they said, well, a human still wrote it. A human gave the AI information, so technically it does count. Like it does follow the rules of going up for a Grammy, I guess, or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's that whole rationalization. And they're next talking about authenticity and where does that sit? And that's, it gets philosophical, but authenticity has value. And we have a radar for that. But if you want good ice cream, do you care that it was made in Vermont by organic milk, or do you just want it to taste good? And people have different opinions on that. But when it comes to especially like leisure goods or a lot of things, they want that authenticity. It's very important. And a lot of things touch and feel and the backstory, all that. But that's kind of maybe a shallow realm. I mean, you're not going to make millions of dollars by making custom leather purses, in our hometown. I mean, even though it's authentic and, it's just, you've got some commercial forces that kind of throttle that back a bit.
Right. Yeah. What's your goal? Is it money or is it just,
Yeah.
Everybody has a different goal.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I still have about 20 different questions I could ask. We really still haven't gotten to the design thinking aspect of things, but I also want to be, recognize that, we have limited time with you today. So I'd love to have you back for, a round 2 to really get into that design thinking and what we can do to really tap into our own creativity, whether that's we're using those organic tools or we're using these digital tools or we're using the emerging technologies. I think there's some fascinating paths to go down. Is there anything that you can think of that someone could do right now, kind of like a universal action that anyone could take, regardless of the background or their interests, that would help them tap into their creativity?
Yeah, it's really subjective, but it would be simple things like write a short story, get a keyboard and just try to create a melody. And then also to draw something. I mean, that sounds really simple, but if you like those 3 prompts, it just pushes different ways of expression, especially if you consider yourself weak in those areas, and just have fun with it. And that's maybe a simple answer, but that's a few ideas to get started.
I like that. And I think it would also be kind of fun to challenge a friend, right? How about we do this together?
Yeah.
You write a short story or you write a melody. I'll write one and we'll share it. And just have that community aspect too.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
And we've done, that's our storytelling. You can have a little percussion in the background, and it's a very fun event, and it's so real, and it's very joyous. So that was, 2-3 years ago, whatever it was.
That was during Design Studio Once last fall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was during last fall.
Oh, is that all? All right. So it's, okay.
Yeah, that
That
was
was a year ago.
Yeah, it was about a year ago.
All right. Usually I go the other way. I think things were a lot longer. But anyway, and remember it fondly. So yeah, it's very communal because people want to be together. That's one thing that's unique, is this idea of is sacrifice. Like we're spending time with each other, and we all have these imperfections and all this stuff, and you're sacrificing your time and setting up this equipment and all that stuff, and we're sacrificing our time, and I think we respond to that really well when people sacrifice. And machines don't sacrifice in the slightest, and we don't feel that way. That's why we want a nurse next to the bed when we're sick. We don't want a machine.
Right.
Wow, that was really good. That was really good.
Well, even a professor. So you get a teacher up there, and he or she is sacrificing time, and they really care, and that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see students that are actually human beings. Imagine teaching to a robot. It'd be like really weird.
It's true. But then, of course, that brings back AI. You're teaching AI.
Yeah, but there's realms, where AI does a better job at teaching than humans do, I think.
It's true.
If you're just absorbing, if it's just declarative statements, these are factoids, or this is how you use the software, there's certainly a place for it to make education more efficient. But where it doesn't replace us is dialogue, critiques, and that kind of stuff, and empathy, and trying to get into, like, I get that all the time, you understand a student, and so you know where their interests are, and that's hard to do by any other means, I think. And it's a sincere empathy that, it's hard to replicate.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
This was
has been
awesome.
fun.
Yeah.
This was fun.
It's been a long day.
It's
Our
such
voices
an
are shot.
So long.
We have tackled some abstract topics today, and I'm proud of us for just pulling it all in. So, good job.
Oh, thank you. I was hoping Carlos would start tapping the table, and giving us a rhythm.
Should we just start? Let's all get musical.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Nick, you want to start us off with a rhythm?
Ooh.
Oh, okay. So I guess. Oh.
Let's see if that E string's in tune.
Oh my God.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
you.
Thanks, Carlos.
Thank you.
Thanks, Selma.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Check out our show notes for bookmarks to your favorite sections and links to resources that we mentioned in today's episode.
You can also find past episodes and see what's on deck for upcoming ones at pct.edu/podcast.
And of course, we are open to your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions, so send those over at podcast@pct.edu.
It's been real.
Catch you next time.